This is the Concorde, known for being one of the fastest jet airliners in the world, because during its time, it certainly was. Although it didn't last as long as the British and French shell before it, it's certainly an iconic marvel even years after its retirement. And many of you have asked me to create a paper version of this iconic aircraft for my series, where I turn real jet planes into foldable, flyable paper models. Seeing how the supersonic airliner is meant to fly at super high speeds, I found this to be an interesting aircraft to try, as this plane isn't meant to glide, as that's what paper planes do. I mean, the Concorde even needed extra afterburners to take off, as the delta wing design was meant for supersonic flight, not create sufficient lift. So in this video, I'll be attempting to create a foldable design that can capture the look of the Concorde while also being able to fly passively stable with one piece of paper. For this video in particular, I wanted to try something different I hadn't done before, which was to make the body 3D. This addition adds a higher wing loading for a plane of its size and a more complicated design. Since all my previous planes fuselages have been 2D, I wanted to see how the 3D body affects its flight performance. To start, I needed a template to get an accurate sizing of the nose, engines, tail, wings, and most importantly, the fuselage. My first idea I had was to use a pen that matched the fuselage height and roll the paper around to create the body. It turned out quite well and it didn't make it too hard to continue. But I realized I forgot to cut the under part of the paper that was crucial for the tail, so I had to start over. After getting back to where it was, I inserted a paper shaft to give the body some structural integrity, but after gluing it in, it was a little heavy, which was a little bit concerning since these wings were already going to be small. So I was a little unsure if it could actually fly with this much weight. I marked where the wings would end so then I could fold up the tail section, and then I cut out the template for the tail shape. Since the wings were extra thick, I had the right amount of paper layers for the engine at the bottom, and I was genuinely surprised at how well everything was working together, as this was only my second attempt. For the nose, since I didn't want it to be too complicated, I took a piece of scrap I cut off earlier and put on a latch to make it be able to move up and down. And I know the nose was definitely way too long, but it was just a proof of concept, so I didn't really care that much. When doing my first few test flights, it looked like it would always fly level for a second or two before turning uncontrollably and diving straight to the ground. It most likely had a high-speed wing stall, which could have happened from either an uneven weight distribution in the wings, an offsetted CG, or a high wing loading, which is the total weight divided by the wing area. And seeing how small the plane is with the tiny wings and the paper shaft I added, this was most likely the issue. But it's likely I messed up all three of those things I mentioned. Alright, so I have a pretty good idea on how to improve this. So when it was flying, it was clear that it was turning left pretty consistently, like rolling to the left. That could either be the CG or like the weight distribution, or it could be both combined. So I think if I were to kind of like, because I did add a little more weight on the side and it did sort of help, so I think it might be the weight issue. But in general, even if it were to fly straight, this plane just flies really poorly. Most likely because of that wing loading thing I was talking about. So for the first thing I noticed is also just these engines, right? They create a lot of drag, and also they're way too big. Like, this is not how long they are in real life, so I'm going to probably shorten them. And then for this body, is probably the biggest part. This body is way too tall. I think I might have measured it wrong, but I'm going to make it a lot smaller and also remove some unnecessary weight. So hopefully it should be able to fly slightly better with the new version. Fixing these issues was relatively simple, just some adjustments in the folding and sizing. I also remade the nose to make it look clearer and more accurate to the original Concorde, but flying, not so much. For the first few throws, the Concorde would violently pitch up, looking like it was trying to do a cobra, and it would do this continuously, so I tried to add some down trim and weight, but even then, it would just go straight down into the ground without gliding or staying level. And when I would throw it upwards, it would roll uncontrollably side to side, leading to a stall, and it would sometimes even do this when I threw it straight down. The more I threw this, I just got even more confused. Even with a lot of weight in the front and even distribution between the wings, it would still either pitch up, dive down, roll, or just die, which makes me think the wing loading might have been even worse on this plane, seeing how inconsistent the results were. It was at the point where I did so many test throws and adjustments, getting one decent fight basically meant nothing. But when I tried a different throwing angle and speed, I realized something pretty important. If you've seen these RC shuttle planes, you know these are meant to be dropped really high in the sky to pick up speed, since these suck at flying, but they will fly at really high speeds. This happens due to their stubbier wings and heavy body, which matches the characteristics of my paper Concorde, which helped me figure out what I had to fix. Alright, so I just finished making the third design, and I actually think this looks like way better compared to the other two I've had, mainly because I cut off a lot of unnecessary, weight and drag, especially like this body. If you compare it to the original, right, this is way smaller, so it should be way more aerodynamic and not as heavy, because both of these had these paper cores. So if I were to compare the weight, this one feels like a feather compared to this one. And also for the engines, Even though they look much smaller than the originals, they are actually accurately sized now after using like a template as like a reference. It is now like the proper size because these are actually way too big compared to the like actual plane. So I'm pretty confident with this. I also made the vertical stabilizer slightly bigger. So I'm pretty confident that this will fly pretty well. And what do you know, cutting off all that unnecessary drag and weight made it fly 10 times better and way more consistently. Out of the 7 throws I did, 6 of them were successful, and we can see how it actually flies like a plane and not a paper rod with fins. I'm actually so shocked on just how well this actually flies. Compared to these two, these two are like rocks, and then this one actually flies. And you know, unlike where with these where I would throw, even when it would you know, pitch up, these would just kind of just stall. That this one, when it pitched up, it actually gained lift, which is kind of crazy. Just seeing like just, you know, making the body much smaller and removing some weight of drag. So yeah, so this actually flies really good and quite accurate. It's like one of my straightest planes that flies, which makes sense. But this has to be probably one of my favorite ones I've done, even though like it's like, you know, a lot of attempts, trial and error, and some frustrations. It's, you know, it kind of shows how, you know, it takes time to make things fly, and making something like this fly is definitely something hard to do, especially also trying to design it. So this kind of shows rough draft, you know, pre-production, whatever, and final. So yeah, I really loved this. If you guys have any, I guess, harder planes to do, as you know, just doing the simpler planes, like just, you know, normal jet planes, I don't know, like the Boeing 747, those are quite easy to do. I did make a video about that, but that's probably something that I could just make. And also the B1, those are like just, I made shorts out of. But stuff like these is where I need to make videos because they do take a lot more time and effort to find, like, make something like this. So yeah, suggest any like jet planes are going to be a little more of a challenge so I can make into these longer videos, because I actually really love to make them. So yeah.